to order. For those at home and in the audience, the mayor is in transit and will be here shortly. For our invocation this morning, we have Mr. Jeff Isaacs of River Lawn Christian Church. I want to invite you up to lead us in the invocation. If you all would please stand, and then we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Councilman. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us, Lord, the beautiful sunshine, the opportunity for these wise men and women to govern the affairs here in this community that you've blessed them with. Father, we pray that you give wisdom today to the men and women behind us. Father, we pray that you would just be honored by the decisions. Lord, we thank you for the gift of life. We thank you for the gift of love, and we thank you for everything good that you've given. I pray for these servants that you'd be with them today, and for this community, Father, we pray that you would be honored here as well. Thank you, Lord, for who you are. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. Madam Clerk.
Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on June 8th, 2021.
Has every member had a chance to review the minutes? All right. There's no discussion. I would move that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 8th, 2021.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Council members, please cast your vote. With 6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion does pass. Madam Clerk, next item.
Proclamations, World Refugee Day.
Is there anyone here from the International Rescue Committee who'd like to come down to receive the proclamation? How are you, sir? Yep. All right, official proclamation of the city. Whereas World Refugee Day has been commemorated on June 20th by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees since 2001, and honors the strength and courage of people who have been forced to flee their homelands due to a well-founded fear of persecution. And whereas the world is currently experiencing the worst refugee crisis in history with over 80 million displaced persons, including 26 million refugees, the highest number ever recorded. And whereas the International Rescue Committee in Kansas has resettled over 1,500 refugees from 17 countries in Wichita since 2012. And whereas refugees have an important place in Wichita and contribute to our community by enriching our culture and using their multitude of professional skills, education, and experiences to provide the area's workforce with essential workers to start businesses and to create a more diverse Wichita. Now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Brandon Johnson, Vice Mayor of the City of Wichita, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim June 20th, 2021 as World Refugee Day in the City of Wichita, and encourage all citizens to uphold our most highly esteemed values of respect and acceptance by embracing refugees and welcoming our newest neighbors in a manner which allows for full integration within our community, building a stronger and more united Wichita.
Hello, everyone. It is a great honor for me to be on this stage. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for recognizing June 20th as the World Refugee Day. I'm happy to accept it on behalf of all the refugees in Kansas and throughout the world. I thank the American people and the government on behalf of all the refugees who are settled in the United States for your support and assistance. I also thank the IRC for working hard in the resettlement process for the refugees. IRC works extremely hard to house the newcomers, make them ready to join the workforce, and start a new life by providing all sorts of support from all angles, such as medical appointments, academic enrollments, transportation, ESOL classes, and so many more. No one becomes a refugee by choice, but situation and circumstances make them leave their home country and their loved ones. I'm one of them. I'm from Afghanistan and left my country due to a 4 decades long war, and honestly, the war is older than I am. The war has torn apart the complete country, wiped out all the opportunities, destroyed the infrastructure that could benefit existing and upcoming generations. All of the essential and basic resources such as education, businesses, employment, and healthcare, etc., are greatly affected and by this unfortunate war. Thus, I made a decision to leave the country and move to a safe place where I can live in peace and improve my education and skills and have better opportunities. I also had my 4 children and did not want them to grow in life-threatening environment. I was not able to tolerate such a big tragedy to lose any one of my kids. I wanted my kids to go to better schools and colleges and become successful in their life. Achieving such goals are possible where there is a complete freedom and peace. I exactly followed my goals. I started working as a dishwasher in one of the restaurants in town, but along with working long hours, I joined Next Step Alliance and got my GED. I went to Hutch Community College and did a technical certification in sheet metal assembly and got a well-paying job. And finally, I was part of the team that we were making 52 aeroplanes for Boeing at Spirit Aerosystem. Unfortunately, Spirit laid off 3,000 people in a single day last year, so I was one of them, but I didn't give up. I went to WSC Tech, I did CNC, and I'm on my way for getting my associate degree in machining technology. Along with education, I work and support my family, but the associate degree will open up much more opportunities. Every refugee that I know of has almost the same story. Refugees are people created by tough times. They are hardworking people, and they definitely want to improve their lives and be successful. They don't want to see those nightmares from whom they escaped. They have already seen poverty, hunger, unemployment, war, crimes, and persecution. The long work hours and challenging jobs are a hobby for all of the refugees, including myself. One of the refugee girls in our community, whose name is Shukriya Sarwar, got the Presidential Award in 5th grade this year. Shukriya worked tremendously hard to achieve that honor. She made her family and every one of us proud. Now, if we look at the reality, if Shukriya would be in Afghanistan, she would only have 1% chance of going to school. Other than that, she would be just a cleaner at home. She would be cooking at the kitchen, helping mom with the kids. But her father took the right step and brought her here and sent her to school. And now she is one of the most successful kids in our community. We have hundreds and thousands of Shukriyas in Afghanistan and all over the world in those unstable countries. But due to the unfortunate wars and crimes, they are kept in distance from the opportunities. Thank you.
Madam Clerk,
Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month.
do we have anyone? Ms. Mansell, I thought I saw you. Just come up here. All right, Proclamation of the City of Wichita. Whereas 55,000 Kansans have Alzheimer's disease, and the more than 6 million people in the United States have Alzheimer's disease, and whereas the 85,000 caregivers in Kansas are providing more than 95 million hours of unpaid care, Whereas by 2025, the number of Kansans diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease will increase to 62,000. And whereas the direct and indirect costs of Alzheimer's and other dementias amount to more than $355 billion annually. Now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Brandon Johnson, Vice Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim June 2021 as Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month in the City of Wichita and encourage citizens to participate in the longest day on June 20th, or summer solstice, where people from across the world will fight the darkness of Alzheimer's through a fundraising activity of choice.
Good morning. Thank you, City of Wichita, members of the Wichita City Council, and Mayor Whipple for today's proclamation declaring June 20th as the longest day. The day with the most light is the day we fight, the summer solstice. On June 20th, people from across the world and here in Wichita will fight the darkness of Alzheimer's through a fundraising activity. This proclamation will help bring a much-needed awareness to the disease. I would also like to introduce Mr. David Welch, who is a business owner and diagnosed with Alzheimer's. David?
So I had the privilege of being a drug trial for the Acuhelm, the first drug to be okayed by the FDA in 20 years. And I want to thank the City Council and the Mayor and everybody in Wichita for supporting this and passing this new proclamation for brain awareness and Alzheimer's. This new medication should change how Alzheimer's and dementia is looked at. So thank you very much.
Under the public agenda, Michael McCorkle, Wichita Sustainability Board.
Good morning, sir. You have 5 minutes. Please, if you will, state your name and address for the record.
I am Michael McCorkle. I currently reside in District 5, 1639 North Brunswick. Wichita is my hometown. Vice Mayor Johnson, City Council men and women, and all Wichitans who are concerned about the future of Wichita. I address this elected body today on behalf of the many young people of Wichita who do not see their future in their hometown and unfortunately do not see you, their elected representatives, planning for Wichita's prosperity against an uncertain future impacted by climate change. I urge the City Council to formally establish an independent sustainability board to help the City Council develop a local sustainability plan. Regardless of your personal or professional priorities, everything will depend on how Wichita plans for climate change in the next few years. Our planet is facing a global climate change emergency, and local governments across the U.S. are failing the people who elected them when it comes to addressing this global crisis that is threatening everyone's future. We are at a time in history when citizens must speak out about the climate change that threatens our daily lives, local prosperity, and the next generation's future, because you, our elected leaders, have not prioritized this future-threatening issue and have not begun the essential work of developing local plans for adaptation and mitigation. Young people take climate change seriously and vote with their feet. Climate change is real and our future is in danger. The latest science is clear. We must reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030, 45% by 2030, and reach net zero by 2050, so future generations, our children and their children, can have a livable planet. Cities represent 70% of global emissions. To survive and thrive, all cities, including Wichita, should have a plan to adapt to global climate change. Without a plan, a city's economy can only react to market shifts, usually on the losing end of population changes, business failures, unemployment, and most importantly, missed market opportunities. Successful future sustainability is as much about economic planning as it is about environmental protection, and the economic consequences to the Wichita economy of not planning for imminent climate change will be your shared legacy if you fail to begin real action now. Last month, we condemned the embarrassingly bad energy efficiency scores the city manager has sent to WSU Environmental Finance Center so they can study how Wichita might score better in the future. These scores show anyone concerned about Wichita's future that the city manager does not take climate change seriously and cannot be depended upon to keep all of you informed. In fairness to this city council, action should have begun years earlier. Regardless, the time for real action is now, and you are the elected representatives. It is important to note that the 2021 CDP report conclusions showed cities that incorporated sustainability in their master planning identified twice as many opportunities as cities that did not. Wichita needs to get started. Last month, on May 18th, Councilman Claycomb called for City Council staff to begin work on developing a sustainability board. The mayor agreed, and the city manager seemed to concur. Last week, the District 6 representative asked the city manager what progress had been made. The city manager replied that he was waiting to discuss the issue with WSU's Environmental Finance Center. Why not compare scores and policies with number 25 ranked Kansas City rather than pay the Environmental Finance Center to reinvent and delay the process like they did with the litter study? I urge all citizens who share my concern to contact their city representatives about the immediate need for the city to address climate change by establishing an independent sustainability board now, not later, and to demand more transparency on how this critical issue is being handled. Thank you for the opportunity to add my voice to the historical record. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Seeing none, appreciate you. Madam Clerk?
Matthew Fehrenbaugh, infrastructure, taxes, etc.
Good morning. You have 5 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Matthew Fehrenbaugh, and my address is 333 South St. Paul Street, Wichita 67213, and I reside in District 2. I'm going to start with, I had a couple topics I want to talk about today, but after some research, I feel this needs to be said. Let me start off with the Kansas Bill of Rights, Section 2. All political powers inherent with the people and all free governments are founded on their authority and are instituted for their equal protection and benefit. No special privileges or immunity shall ever be granted by the legislative which may not be altered, revoked, or repealed. By the same body, we the people, and this power shall be exercised by no other tribunal or agency. Section 3. The people have the right to assemble in a peaceful manner, to consult for the common good, to instruct their representatives, and to petition the government or any department thereof for their redress of grievances. Section 20. This enumeration of rights shall not be construed to impair or deny others retained by the people, and all the powers not herein delegated remain with the people. The State Article 53, Section 60, 5320, Public Speech Protection Act, grants me the authority to discuss what I feel necessary to address. You must have forgotten who you guys work for. This, from the very start, is a violation of my constitutional rights to free speech and to address my government for redress of grievances. I'm here for one purpose and one purpose only, to demand a forensic audit of the 2018, 19, and 20 elections here in Sedgwick County. As we have seen with the evidence pouring out, dozens of states are now auditing their elections and fighting massive amounts of widespread voter fraud, but today I will only address Kansas. In 2014, ES&S machines were acquired by Kansas. As we have discovered, Dominion, ES&S, and Smartmatic are all one entity. Since 2012, multiple WSU statistical experts who are very left-leaning have been suing for audits, talking about how these machines are rigged. Multiple articles in the Wichita Eagle have confirmed this. In 2016, Sedgwick County approved a new machine purchase, ES&S, with little to no data on what or who. Sedgwick County was the only told that these machines were federally accredited. Who accredited it? Did we the people accredit it? At the end of 2015, all 50 states purchased and acquired ES&S Smartmatic or Dominion machines, which we now know are rigged. There is evidence all over the country, which I will provide you with today in my sworn statement that I am demanding a forensic audit of the elections in Sedgwick County. Last point, Facebook. In October 2020, Sedgwick County took an $816,000 donation for our elections from a group called the Center for Tech and Civic Life, an organization owned and funded by Facebook. Why are you taking money from big tech? And when our tax dollars already fund this process? We the people did not authorize that. Who got paid? What was the money used for? And who got the money? How much did big tech influence Kansas elections? Also, why is the state election director a part of the Center for Election and Innovation Research, otherwise known as SEER, a pathway for states to override the people and take away our free vote? This is a direct pathway to communicate with the federal government and big tech. What we have learned over this last year, that COVID was used to create and instill fear in the people, and it had one purpose: to change the elections and violate the Constitution of we the people. If these were free and fair elections, there should be nothing to hide with an open and transparent forensic audit. Fighting it only shows that someone is trying to hide something. The last 2 years you have shown you don't work for we the people here in Sedgwick County, Kansas, but rather for special interest in your own interest. Be advised, pursuant to 18 U.S. Code 2382, misprision of treason, and 18 U.S. Code 4, misprision of felony, I am hereby giving you legal notice and information and evidence that represent a national security threat and must be acted upon immediately. Failure to act on your part will be a violation of these laws and other laws of the United States of America and of Kansas. You know, our children do need a future here in the United States of America, and what's happening is not okay. Everybody knows it, everybody feels it. So I hope you guys do the right thing, and thank you for having me today.
Seeing no questions.
Can I leave this with you guys, or?
You can. I do want to encourage you, though. It is Sedgwick County that handles elections. You might want to go address.
Well, it starts at a local level. The Constitution works from the ground up, not the top down.
But it's Sedgwick County that handles the elections.
Well, they don't have meetings. Do they have meetings?
Yes, Wednesday mornings.
All right. Well, I'll send them a copy too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk.
Jane Burns, Wichita Sustainability Board.
Good morning, Jane. Please state your
Good
name
morning.
and address for the record.
That's a hard act to follow. But I'll try. My name is Jane Burns. I've lived in District 5 and 6 and for many years in District 1. I belong to a large number of local and national groups, but the grassroots folks you've heard in the past few months asking for a Wichita Sustainability Board and Plan aren't in my established and wonderful groups. Some grassroots speakers were adult experts, such as WSU engineers and physicists. More than half were young, from juniors in high school to the far end of 20-something. The Wichita Eagle's article in yesterday's newspaper summarized that Wichita's youth drain could be ameliorated if we paid attention to their concerns. Yes, those brave and articulate speakers were grassroots, connected by their passion for our planet and their future. Remember those low scores on the ACEEE, the 2020 American Council for an Energy Efficiency Economy. One of those low scores was for community engagement. A national, scrupulously nonpartisan group, which is still drafting their survey of best practices for cities' climate action plans, recommends that, has a menu of recommendations so residents can customize how to reduce greenhouse gases with their own town's challenges and opportunities. I have personally been disappointed in the Environmental Finance Center to which Wichita Sustainability is currently assigned. Some of you may remember that I was among the 4 folks who proposed the Single-Use Plastic Bag Task Force almost 2 years ago. The EFC appears to have lost its single-use plastic bag focus, and it has made glacial progress, like we have all the time in the world. Our ask today and over the past 3 months is that Wichita establish a local, diverse Wichita Sustainability Board composed of young people, retirees, folks of various races and neighborhoods, both experts and fresh thinkers. Such a local, diverse Wichita Sustainability Board can work together vigorously, transparently, and meaningfully. You know, the new Wichita Sustainability Board would figure this all out, but me, I'll throw out a couple of suggestions, starter suggestions. My neighbors talk about planting a whole lot more trees. And I've learned that of a small city near Seattle that's aiming to plant 1 million trees to restore green cover and to eat up that CO2. That's kind of simple, and lots of folks could participate in that. This very large, credible, nonpartisan organization I mentioned that's been surveying climate action plans by so many towns and counties across the U.S. I'll come back next month, if you like, when that extraordinary group releases its report. But these are a few of the climate action best practices they've identified and have cities that are successfully implementing these. Require or create incentives for retrofit of private buildings for energy efficiency. Offer incentives for and facilitate residential, neighborhood, and commercial rooftop solar. Offer incentives and rebates for electric vehicles and electric appliances. Reduce vehicle miles by planning measures and incentives. It recommends setting goals to reduce greenhouse gases and taking inventory annually. Assigning authority and budget, linking greenhouse gas reduction to workforce development, and embracing public transparency. Climate change is making big problems bigger. Thank you so much, decision makers, for your careful attention to this huge and growing and important priority that will create jobs and may interest and retain our young people. Thank you so much for listening all over again. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to share the draft of that immense report with all the cities that are already doing. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Thank you so much. We do need local input. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Andy Speck, Wichita Sustainability Board.
Ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, my name is Andy Speck. I currently reside in District 6 at 400 West Central Avenue, 67203. I'd like to speak regarding a topic that I myself am rather familiar with today. I've worked in and around the automotive industry for about 4 years now and have really been keeping up with the trends in the market. And the biggest one that we're seeing right now is a rise in electric vehicles, or otherwise known as EVs. Now, they have been a wonderful way to help reduce emissions put out by conventional gasoline or diesel vehicles. Wichita has not seen as many on their roads, and I think a huge part of that is a lack of a charging station, public charging station, and infrastructure involved with that. As far as Tesla superchargers go, which Tesla is the biggest name in the game, Wichita has one. It is located in Applebee's at 47th and Broadway, and Don't get me wrong, I'm sure that the staff and patrons of said Applebee's really enjoy being able to charge their Teslas during a meal, but I do not think that that is good enough. I would like to propose that we maybe look into having more public access charging stations for EVs to help incentivize people to purchase them. A huge detractor in purchasing an EV is a phenomenon known as range anxiety, and that's the fear that, oh my goodness, what if I'm driving and my battery runs out? I can't just go charge, or I can't fill it up with gas like I could a normal car. So that's a huge factor and deterrent into why some people aren't interested in purchasing these vehicles. I feel that if there was a larger infrastructure of charging stations around town, we would see an increase in electric vehicles. Thank you so much for your consideration and for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, I know you might not have the exact number, but I do believe the new multimodal facility will have charging stations. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so there's some investment coming. We definitely appreciate you saying that and encouraging us to do more. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Consent agenda items 1 through 7A.
Has every member had a chance to review the consent agenda? Are there any items any member would like to pull off? Seeing none, I would move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Council members, please cast your vote. With 6 yeas, 0 nays, that item passes. Madam Clerk.
Report of Board of Bids and Contracts dated June 14th, 2021.
Good morning, council members. Hannah Lang, Department of Finance, here for the June 14th Board of Bids recommendations. First engineering bid we have is Auburn Hills T3 Pond Bank Repair, Wildcat Construction for $47,653. Water Distribution System Tide Project to serve Firefly Way Addition Phase 5. Kansas Paving for Group 1 and 2 for a total of $296,745.90. Ammunition GT Distributors for Group 1 of $119,970. Group 2 of $242,490. White and yellow pavement marking paint defer to June 21st Board of Bids. Four-wheel drive articulated 3.5 yard wheel loader defer to June 21st. Foaming root control herbicide, key equipment and supply for $38,625. Joint and crack sealant, no bids received. Groundwater monitoring well sampling for Wellfield, defer to June 21st. 66,000 GVWR cabin chassis excavator truck for defer to June 21st. Wildland Fire PPE clothing and personal deployment gear, McKinsey Enterprises for $57,176.80. This is our purchasing procurement website, as well as our current open request for proposals. That is the Board of Bid recommendations. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions from the council? Seeing that, Jennifer, do we have to go out to the public on that?
Not on this item.
Okay. Well, with that, I would move that the City Council receive and file the report, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Council members, please cast your vote. That motion does pass 6-0. Madam Clerk.
Petitions for public improvements.
Good morning, Mayor. Vice Mayor and Council members, Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The item before you this morning is petitions for public improvements. Signatures on all petitions represent 100% of the improvement district and are valid per Kansas statute. The first development for new petitions is Cornell Industrial Edition. This is on both sides of 21st Street North, west of I-135. The petitions will provide water, sewer, and paving improvements required for redevelopment of a commercial addition. The next development is Sawmill Creek Edition, east of Rock Road, north of 45th Street North. Petitions have been submitted for water, drainage, sewer, and paving improvements for a new residential development. And the last one is Brookfield Edition, south of 37th Street North, east of Greenwich Road. Includes petition for paving improvements for a new residential development. Staff recommends City Council approve the petitions and budgets, adopt the amending resolutions, authorize necessary signatures, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions from the council? All right, seeing none, I would move that the City Council approve the revised and new petitions and budgets, adopt the amending resolutions, and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Council members, please cast your vote.
Councilmember Fry, would you please cast your vote? Thank you.
Motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk.
Drainage and clubhouse improvements, golf system.
Have for you today is in regards to our golf system. We have 2 golf courses that are in need of repair and upgrades. So a little bit of background, we have several improvements that are needed at these 2 golf courses. Tex Consolver needs a roof and ventilation system, upgrades and repair. And McDonald, we need some repairs in regards to retention drainage facilities. Both of these projects are very important infrastructure for the operations of the golf courses. A little bit more background. Tex Consolver is our busiest course. The clubhouse was built in 1970, and this clubhouse generates concessions and pro shop sales. The roof is experiencing multiple failures. They're getting very good with their buckets at each one of the monthly or daily rains that are happening out there. The ventilation system needs to be upgraded while the roof is being repaired, so it's a good idea to do both at the same time. The estimated cost for both of these projects is $100,000. At McDonald, the drainage improvements. We did some drainage improvements in 1995 with the stormwater division, but it's been a while, and so there's some other things that need to be upgraded since then. But these ponds serve a very important purpose. They enhance the beauty and the playing conditions of the golf course. The interconnection of the ponds are used for irrigation. It's estimated that we can save about $25,000 a year if we make these repairs to our city water system. We'll reduce our dependence on the city water system, which is a great thing on many different levels. And it will improve the drainage in the surrounding areas of the neighborhood. So these failures, the failures are resulting in the inability for the drainage system to retain the water on a regular basis. The repairs will include concrete weir walls, overflow structures, outfall piping, grouted riprap for the overflow, and some bridge enhancements and rehab as well. The estimated cost is $250,000 for that project. Our financial considerations, the total amount that's being requested is $350,000. This will improve the golf system and allow these repairs to be made while maintaining adequate fund reserves for their cash flow purposes. Our current balance that was reported in 2020, for the end of 2020, was $600,000, leaving a balance of $250,000 at the end of 2020, dollars that came in. This year, we're expecting strong revenues to increase the golf funds even further in our reserves. At the end of April, we reported $100,000, and the end of May, we reported $300,000 in the black. We need to continue to make investments in our courses and our infrastructure, and these will help us continue to be profitable. These projects will be timed to minimize the play. The irrigation and drainage will be conducted in the late fall, early winter. And the roof project could happen any time over a text. The Facilities Division of Public Works and Utilities will be helping us with these projects and manage these projects. The Law Department has approved the bonding ordinance for this project. It is recommended that the City Council approve the project, approve the bonding resolution, authorize any necessary budget adjustments and transfer of funds, and approve the necessary signatures. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Troy, at one time, well, let me ask this. The ponds at McDonald, will they be made larger? Are they going to grow in size? Because I think I remember seeing at one time a recommendation for those ponds to be larger to make it even more challenging course to play, as well as take care of some of these other issues.
They will not build, so it's only to make the repairs that we need to actually meet the capacity that it has right now. Right now, it's not able to hold the capacity that we have had in the past.
So by making these repairs, would there be the opportunity to make them larger in the future if that is something that we've got the budget for, or was that a recommendation that was just left alone?
I think that was a recommendation. I remember further back, but it would require a whole lot more design, would have a huge impact on the course design as well and the playability of the course. So the idea here is just to repair what we have to get back to the irrigation capacity that we had in the past.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, go out to the public. Any input on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the bench. If there are no other discussion, I will move that the City Council approve the project, approve the bonding resolution, authorize any necessary budget adjustments and transfers of funds, and approve any necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Council members, please cast your vote. Motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk.
Wholesale water service agreement with the City of Roseville.
Good morning, Vice Mayor, City Council, Penny Fives, Public Works and Utilities. This item is regarding the wholesale water service agreement with Rose Hill. As you know, the City of Wichita is a wholesale water provider, and the City of Rose Hill has been a customer since 1981. The current agreement is due to expire at the end of next year. Earlier this year, we heard from Rose Hill, and they requested that we go ahead and negotiate the renewal to be in effect beginning this year. As we're renewing these long-standing agreements, we do a couple of things to make sure we're standardizing them for all of our wholesale customers. So those are the only changes that you'll see to the current agreement. The first one will add a secondary connection, which means Rose Hill can either establish a connection with the City of Wichita or another water provider that they could use in case of emergency if for some reason the service line from Wichita is not available. We have revised the projected schedule of usage, and we added a take or pay clause, which again is standard for our agreements, which basically says, tell us how much you think you'll use, and if you don't use 50% of that, you would pay for that amount anyways. Here is the projected schedule of use. This is what we've seen their typical annual average usage to be in the last 5 years. It's representative of that, so no surprises here. And the financial considerations are, we expect this to be about $150,000 minimum yearly revenues. For the last 5 years, they've averaged about double that because they do take pretty much everything they schedule to use. With that, the recommendation is to approve the wholesale water service agreement with the City of Rose Hill and authorize the necessary signatures. I can stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. This isn't really related to this specific agreement, but it came up at my district advisory board. Can we get a list of all of the cities that we have wholesale water agreements with?
Yes.
I think that's something that I know my board would be interested in. So
we can do that. I'll get that to you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, go out to the public. Is there any comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the bench. If there is no other discussion, I will move that the City Council approve the wholesale water service agreement with the City of Rose Hill and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Council members, please cast your vote. Motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk.
Water Service Area Agreement with Rural Water District 5, NRD Edition.
Good morning again, Vice Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works Engineering. The item before you is a Water Service Area Agreement with Rural Water District 5 to serve NRD Edition. The City of Wichita was approached by the developer of NRD Edition in 2019 to provide water service to a new residential development within the Rural Water District 5 territory or service area. This area was annexed into Wichita with the NRD Edition plat on February 7th, 2020. City staff, along with the help of Councilmember Tuttle, were able to negotiate the water service rights for this area. Previously, we've come before the council for this same type of agreement with Rural Water Districts 4 and 3. There are no specific ground rules or guidelines for how this is supposed to work, so it does take some negotiation. I think we came to a good compromise with this agreement. What you see on this map, just below the green box is 21st Street North, just to the left of it is 143rd Street East. The green area is the 50 acres of NRD Edition within Rural Water District number 5 service territory, which is all of the blue. The agreement that's before you today is specific to this 50 acres only and is not intended to necessarily apply to any future city development within Rural Water District 5. We would take that up with them again at that time. In this agreement, the City of Wichita agrees to collect a 5% surcharge from customers in the NRD Edition and pass this on directly to Rural Water District 5. This is similar to what was done previously with Rural Water District 4. The 5% surcharge is applied to the base and actual compensation charges for water service after the initiation of each service within the addition. All water sold will be measured by individual residential meters that are owned and maintained by the city. The number of parcels available within this development is approximately 97. And again, the 5% surcharge would be a pass-through from the City of Wichita to Rural Water District 5. There's no cost to the city at this time. Based on average residential use, our estimate is that this would add somewhere from $16 to $20 to each homeowner, and that's per year. So it's a fairly insignificant amount that will be added on and passed through. With that, staff recommends the City Council approve the water service agreement with Rural Water District 5 and authorize the necessary signatures, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, go out to the public. Is there any input on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the bench and turn it over to Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you, and I appreciate Gary mentioning that it was going to be less than $20 a year. I was going to make sure that we mentioned that, because when we see an increase, even if it's 5%, we just want our residents to know that we're working hard to make sure that the cost is still minimal. But I wanted to thank Rural Water District 5 for their compromise with us. I didn't know anything about rural water districts when I started this process, and I learned a great deal, did a lot of research, and truly it's been a fascinating process. Also, thanks to Gary and everyone in Public Works and Utilities for teaching me and being patient as I asked a lot of questions, but really to make sure that, as I mentioned, a great compromise, but most importantly, that the user rates were kept low. So with that, I would move that the City Council approve the water service agreement with Rural Water District 5 and authorize the necessary signatures.
I will second that. Motion has been made and seconded. Council, please cast your vote. Motion passes 6-0. Madam Clerk.
Ordinance creating Chapter 2.06 of the Code of the City of Wichita prohibiting discrimination.
Mr. Vice Mayor, this item had been proposed by the mayor. We had not planned a staff presentation on it. I thought the mayor would make the presentation.
Okay. Well, I know the mayor indicated he would be here shortly after 10. I do know that we have 2 executive sessions. If the council would like, we could go to executive session for those and come back to council meeting at which time the mayor might be here.
Is that a motion?
No, I was just opening up discussion.
Brainstorming.
Councilmember Cerullo.
Does the mayor need to be present for executive session?
If he is present, he can be there. He does not have to be there. Well, I think we could get those out of the way. Again, I know the mayor had some thoughts on this. There have been some amendments worked on. I could speak to those, but I also know, as the manager said, the mayor had some comments as well. So, Jennifer, do I just say both of them in one motion?
Two separate motions, actually. You can take them up at the same vote, but if you would read them separately.
Okay. Oh, Councilmember Clayton, I'm sorry.
I just have a question. So you're suggesting we go into executive session, and then when we come back, we'll take up this. So we'll take up this item?
Yes.
And so just in fairness to the people that are here in the public, we need to, I think, be really thoughtful about how long we're going to be gone, because I know sometimes we extend, and it gets longer and longer. And I don't know if that will happen today, but I want to make sure that we don't inconvenience them any more than we already are by not taking this up at the time that we said we would take it up. So.
Jennifer, about how long do you think these two items would take?
There are two executive sessions at this time. The first one we've asked for 20 minutes, and the second one I think is a council executive session that we've been requested for 40 minutes.
Oh.
So those times can be fluid depending on how the discussion goes, but that's what we're looking at this time.
Okay. I think Councilmember Claycomb has a point there.
It's, Mr. Vice Mayor, you could do the first item, and then, you know, timing-wise, that may be enough. Do the first 20 minutes and then come back out, and then go back into executive session. Would that work, Jennifer? On the second longer item later, if you want to try to accommodate the public. Okay.
Councilmember Tuttle?
Thank you. In the second session, that's the longer one, we may have to extend. I'm anticipating some robust discussion, so that sounds like a reasonable request.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bob. So we could go into one short executive session and then take this item up for certain, whether the mayor is here or not at that point before we go into our longer executive session. Any other discussion? All right, I would move that the city council go into executive session for legal consultation with the city attorney, which would be deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship for pending litigation, legal advice to discuss a claim.
Mr. Vice Mayor, if I could just add to that language just so we dot the i's. I would just recommend that we include for the record that we recess into executive session for 20 minutes to receive information on an offer of settlement pursuant to state law for the reasons you mentioned, and that this session is required to protect attorney-client privilege in the public interest.
Can I make that my motion? That is my motion.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Council members, please cast your vote.
Sorry about that. Jumped the gun. Did we get everybody?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No, it just had 4 of us.
Let me try it again.
All right, motion passes 6-0. We are in executive session for 20 minutes and we'll return at 10:14.
Thank you.
Session, no binding action was taken. The mayor is now here. I will turn the floor over to the mayor.
Thank you, and I want to thank the Vice Mayor for chairing this meeting in my absence. And it is good to be here. So thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, and thank you, Council, for indulging me in my tardiness. With that, I would recognize the clerk for the next item on the agenda.
Ordinance creating Chapter 2.06 of the Code of the City of Wichita prohibiting discrimination.
All right, well, as we wait for staff to come up to tell us about this, I want to open up with a statement. The manager just did what he normally does when he has something to add.
Mayor, it's your presentation. We don't have a staff lead-in today.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, luckily, we have some of the volunteers here from Equality Kansas who worked with the Human Rights Commission, or excuse me, the Human Rights Campaign over the weekend, volunteering their hours to ensure that we have a choice and an opportunity to really get this right, to have the best ordinance possible that will meet the standards necessary to get us beyond, I think, that Wichita attitude that we sometimes had where, that attitude of it's good enough. So I just want to first thank you for taking your time this weekend, for gathering the subject matter experts, and to make sure that we have this opportunity today. And I want to thank the public who reached out, either by email, by social media, and those who were able to get the day off today on short notice on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. to come in here and to talk about why we are doing this and why it's important. And I want to say that it's so important that we do the work of the people. And don't ever let us forget that we work for you. And please don't let us forget that today. I also want to say that I will never experience some of the personal discrimination that some of the folks here today have experienced. And as mayor of Wichita, and as the head of this city, according to our ordinance, I want to first apologize to every member of the LGBTQ community, past and present, who has ever faced abuse, fear, discrimination. Am I not on?
Hey, Tyler.
You didn't mute yourself, did you?
Tyler, we can't hear. Testing. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Test.
So,
there you go. There we go. Thanks, Tyler.
I would just say again, I will never know what it's like to personally experience the discrimination that some of the folks here today have experienced. And as mayor of Wichita, and as someone who is, according to our ordinance, the symbolic head of this city, I want to apologize to every LGBTQ member of our community, past and present, who has ever faced abuse, fear, discrimination, violence, or worse within our city, while leaders missed such an opportunity that we have here today to protect you, to show you through actions and not just words, through ordinance and not just proclamation, that you are valued, that you are part of our community, and that you deserve to be treated as we would like others to treat us, because you are a part of us, and we together are Wichita. So with that, thank you for being here. I was unaware that staff wasn't going to be able to make a presentation, so your role in this is just so much more vital. As thanks to you, we now have 2 ordinances that we can decide and talk about today. So with that, I would like to recognize a member of this great coalition who has come together to help us. Yes, ma'am.
Point of clarification. Are you asking someone to come up and talk about the ordinances or to share our statements?
Let's start off with the ordinances. You will fulfill the role of a subject matter expert, and then also we usually have the discussion about the ordinance, and then we have questions about the ordinance, and then we will have discussion about really, I think, personal input as well. So you will have no time limit. Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Before we go out to the public, I just wanted to recognize State Representative Stephanie Byers, who has arrived. Thank you for being here, Representative.
Welcome, Representative. Thank you for being here. Please, Professor, please introduce give us your name, and if you're comfortable, your address, and then we can review for the record, and then we can review the two ordinances and really go over, I guess, the work that you guys did so well this weekend.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Carrie Wilkes. I am in District 2. I am the chairperson of Equality Kansas, which is a volunteer role for me.
My name is Liz Hamer. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Community Outreach for Equality Kansas, and I'm also a registered lobbyist for Equality Kansas.
Council people and Wichitans watching, we've got phenomenal ordinances to suggest to you. It might feel rushed, but the two ordinances that we have worked on over the weekend have been vetted by Equality Kansas, who has been doing this work since 2004, and by the Human Rights Campaign, who has been doing this work for a very, very long time, and who has a fleet of attorneys. And one was put at our disposal, and who worked tirelessly with our executive director. Yesterday, we offered the mayor and several city council persons two amended versions of the ordinance that Mayor Whipple put forward. You might ask, why were these amendments needed? Well, the first ordinance that was put forward, incredible. It speaks to the dignity and worth of all marginalized groups in Wichita. You might wonder, why are LGBTQ people the ones at the stage? Well, it's not just for us, to be clear. It's for all marginalized groups, and LGBTQ people are the ones that are not addressed at the state and federal level fully. This is why we needed an amendment. With this, we offered two versions. In my colloquial, casual terminology, I like to call one of them the Cadillac of NDOs. The Cadillac of NDOs included the creation of a Human Rights Council here in Wichita. Fairly standard, not a surprise. It's not like this would be the first city ever doing it. And we're also savvy people and recognize that might not be for everyone. There's a lot of infrastructure that might go into that. So, anticipating that that could be a hurdle, we also brought forth an amendment to the original ordinance that did not have that, but rather uses the existing structures to create teeth to a policy so that if someone in a marginalized community actually experiences discrimination, and yes, you're going to hear some of these stories because it does exist, something could be done about it. There were fines put in. Because let me be clear, you gotta have something like that. If you're talking about a fire and people say, you know what, we don't really have the budget to fully fund the whole city, so we're gonna leave these marginalized people out in this community. And so when their house is on fire and we're not gonna do anything if the fire department doesn't go out and put out those flames. Perhaps that seems hyperbolic to you all, but that's what it feels like to me as an LGBTQ person. You gotta have something that makes it real. You gotta have something that shows that you're serious about the dignity and worth of all marginalized communities. And this is why we stand by Mayor Whipple proposed these two options for you fine people, and we really, really implore you to take one of them.
And just for clarification, the original that was put in, or I guess I did, and with staff here, we thought that there could be protections at the state level that would have the enforcement mechanism. And after speaking to the subject matter experts, to the nationally renowned Human Rights Committee campaign, and also with you folks who is the leading organization in the state, I learned that that was not true, that at the state it was inadequate for us to move forward with such a proposal. And while we might see some enforcement, it severely lacked with the overarching, I guess, spirit of the legislation that we're trying to discuss today, or the ordinance that we're trying to add. So are those correct statements? Is that an accurate interpretation of this? So when it comes to the Honda plan, both of these get us where we have, I didn't mean to call it Honda plan. I know you call it Cadillac, but now I've marked this way.
Hey, I have a Honda. I love my Honda. Great value, durability, sustainability. And you know what? Let's call it that, because Hondas are great cars. And just because it's not a Cadillac doesn't mean it doesn't get the job done.
And that's what I want to clarify this.
Yeah.
Both of these ordinances here printed out in front of us get the job done at this point. And both bring us up to par with the type of cities that we want to compete against economically, and for young talent, and for attracting new talent and retaining the talent we have. So with that, can we just maybe go over I believe it's version 2, or draft, is what we had in our email. It is, for the record, 51578, aka the Honda plan. It would be probably the easiest and quickest for us to actually implement and be able to utilize, while also allowing our Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Board to give them something to work with and see if they want to play a larger role when it comes to human rights, instead of just starting at a Human Rights Committee. So with that, I would like us just to kind of go over the process when it comes to, or what really the ordinance is, and what the process would be of it if someone was to file a complaint.
Okay. I'm a little unsure. Am I speaking to people that are looking at this, or no?
So and they should be. Everyone should have a copy of this. Is there anybody who doesn't have a copy of this?
Are we talking about these 3 documents here, right?
Yes. So the first one we're talking about is the one that gets the job done but doesn't form its own Human Rights Commission.
Does the public see these? Or no?
Yes, these have all been made public. And that is 51578. So that's the one we've got to go over. I want to go over the mechanics of it. I want to go over what the policy says, and then we can ask questions about the policy, and then we can debate the policy. So this is as if we are, we have an expert here who's going to explain to us what's in the policy. It's as if we had staff up here doing it. Councilmember Tuttle, do you have a question about the ordinance, or?
I was just going to make sure and ask the same question that Councilmember Bluebaugh did. We have an internal policy that everything that we discuss from the bench goes to the public by Thursday the week prior. So I'm just concerned that the public has seen these. We just got it last night at 7 something. So I've read it, but I haven't had a chance to research it or consult with anyone, but I'm more concerned about the public. Has the public been able to have access to these documents?
So the
Because
policy
people are
we're-
watching and they're gonna probably wanna have, dialogue or questions. So I just wanna know where we stand with that.
Yes, the public has access to this. I believe in the media, who we normally publish these through, we have a representative from the Eagle here, and you could just nod. Have you had access to these documents? Personally? Yes. You haven't, so okay.
What I can say is
So
that
these were presented online. They were online yesterday. They have circulated, and
Where online?
I know I personally put them on, I'm an administrator on the South Central chapter of Equality Kansas's Facebook page. And some of our members asked to see this, so I posted them online there.
yeah, I posted them in a Dropbox on social media, and then posted them throughout all the online discussions I saw with this. And luckily, we have the subject matter experts here today, so we can go over the 4 pages that this ordinance is. And so we're talking about civil rights. It's a pretty standard policy. We're talking about protections other cities had. These are the standards that if you look up other policies from other Kansas cities, there's not a whole lot of new material to consume with this. So anybody who wanted to know, I guess, in the public what these look like or what they are, it's available. So let's go ahead and start off with the, we have the definitions in front of us, the policy prohibiting discrimination in front of us. I think that really kind of mirrors some of the policy that everyone here has access to since Monday, and the public has had access to since Wednesday. And so I think that the real difference is if we could just walk through the enforcement, which is less than a page long. It looks like it is
Section
4
5.
sections.
Yep.
Yeah, section 5, it looks like it's A, B, C, and D. Again, for those who are watching, it is less than a page long. So if we could go through that, that is the new part that was posted last night that the public might not have had access to through our city, website, as I'm sure over the weekend, I'm sure the person who posted that wasn't working. So go ahead.
Let me give you a 10,000-foot view. The enforcement that was added here basically establishes fines. It leaves it to the city attorney to investigate and determine the violations, and it gives citizens, it gives the people of Wichita the right to private action if the city fails to act. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. You discriminate against someone, there can be a fine. There's recourse. So with that in mind, in section 5, and again, I will repeat that this is the language taken with the expertise of the executive director and lobbyist of Equality Kansas, and also one of the senior lead attorneys of the Human Rights Campaign.
And just for clarification, when we talk about going out to the public, is there anyone else who works in this space in Wichita who has experience drafting these that should have been brought to the table? Or is it fair to say that Equality Kansas and the Human Rights Campaign are the top 2 organizations?
Equality Kansas is the LGBTQ organization that deals with political matters related to discrimination or ending discrimination in the state of Kansas.
And you guys have a registered lobbyist at the state level who also has input on all legislation, and thus
We have sponsored legislation and lobbied in Topeka for many, many years.
And when it comes to the public and making sure that we have public information on such a specific subject matter, there is no other alternative locally when it comes to folks who have a history and experience combing through legislation, or in our sense, an ordinance, to help define this, what we should have going forward. Is that correct?
I'm sure there are many attorneys with fine minds that could have an opinion, and this is the organization that has been doing this work since 2004.
Thank you for that. So let's go over, just if we can, the enforcement with A, which is, it is unlawful for any person to infringe upon the right to be free from discrimination based on membership in a protected class in employment, housing, public accommodations pursuant to the section. So that means that enforcement only happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, when there is discrimination in terms of housing, public accommodations, and employment. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay, and so with that, that means that, do you hear these like what ifs? Like, well, what if now we can't have ladies' night? Because, you know, of an ordinance like this. And I know it's almost, I think it's a little silly to be honest, but I've heard this. So,
Mayor, may I?
Yes, if we could.
I was the plaintiff in the lawsuit that brought marriage equality to Kansas. And when I wanted to pledge my fidelity to my beautiful wife, I heard a similar argument. I heard, you know what? If we let you marry, someone else is going to want to marry a dog. And I do not exaggerate. These what-if questions hide discrimination.
Okay. Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just gonna suggest, you already started, but just for those at home or tuning in who haven't seen this, maybe we could read section A, B, C, and D. Might be hard for them to keep notes, but at least they'll hear it.
Yeah, my goal was to read the section and get feedback from it and then go to the next section. I think that we're almost wrapped up with A. And as you read, were mentioned, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, and D is the only new part that wasn't released on Wednesday. So I think it's important we utilize the time to talk about this. So A is limiting this to employment, housing, and public accommodations. B reads, and then we'll get comment. Subject to the procedures developed by the City of Wichita, the city attorney shall receive, initiate, investigate, seek to consultate, hold hearings on, and pass upon complaints alleging violations of this ordinance. If a complaint is not successfully consulted, the City of Wichita shall hear the matter and make a determination as to whether a violation of this ordinance has occurred. If the city determines that a violation has occurred, the city shall issue an order to cease and desist from the discriminatory practice and levy a fine of $500 for the first violation, $1,000 for a second violation, and $2,000 for a third or subsequent violation. Each day any violation of this ordinance continues shall constitute a separate offense. These penalties shall be enforced if necessary via an action in municipal court. All proceedings described herein shall be conducted in accordance with Kansas law. So this seems like the due process and exploration of facts, and to determine that hopefully a mediation could happen between the two parties. But if worst case scenario and there is no mediation, and particularly if this persists, this allows for the action to be corrected, hopefully through a fine. Okay, and for the record,
correct.
Yes. So is there, and I also want to make sure that we use the expertise of the your assistant or person assisting you, and as well, but is there any more we could add about this section?
I think the only thing else on this is just to focus on that people can seek redress through municipal court on there. That's an important part, that it's through City of Wichita court.
And can you repeat that with the microphone? Sorry. The municipal court, go ahead.
Sorry, it's the mask.
Yeah, no, actually, I think we're heading into C. So in B, oh my goodness, I just had a brain freeze. What was I asked?
We're just
yeah,
going
this is
through
what
the
happens
process.
with menopause.
Just for clarification, go through the process. So you would, a complaint of an alleged violation would first be administered. And then the city shall hear the matter and make a determination as to whether the violation of the ordinance has occurred. So there would be an opportunity for the person who the complaint is filed against to say, to offer their side.
Yes, so to be clear, and my apologies, I obviously did not know I was going to be presenting this, and
I apologize for that, because I didn't know that either.
I understand, and fortunately, I am used to doing things extemporaneously. But this section is very, very simple. It gives everyone, as the mayor said, the right to due process. We can't assume someone is discriminating, and we got to protect those that have, in fact, been discriminated. So, if you have been discriminated, we got some fines here. Why we got fines? You got to make someone have a reason to stop doing deplorable actions. And my experience shows that pocketbooks talk. People respond when their wallet is hurt. Okay, so we got fines here. But we don't just slap a fine on. Of course we're going to investigate. Of course we're going to give due process. Okay? And we got to make sure that we're not going to have crazy stuff happening. So we're going to make sure we follow all Kansas laws.
So, and that might get us into C as well. So section C is one sentence. It says, the city attorney does not resolve, if the city attorney does not resolve a complaint within 120 days, the complaint may seek redress through municipal court. Now, my interpretation of the 120 days is that it allows plenty of time for a remedy to come up. So this isn't like getting a speeding ticket and now you have to go to court and defend yourself. This is, hey, you can remedy this with your landlord, with your boss, God forbid, with an agent of our city who's representing the city and denying accommodations. It gives plenty of time to try to remedy that. And if so, if 120 days pass and there is no remedy, then that's when it actually gets to court. Is that an accurate read of this?
Yes, it could be taken to municipal court.
It could be, yes. After 120 days of trying literally everything else.
After trying everything else, and to be clear, this provides protections for people that might not wish to follow the policy. This is why we have enforcement policies, to ensure that the ordinances, the laws that the good people see fit to establish are actually followed.
And that brings us, I guess, into D, which is the last section of section 5. Which is, again, one sentence, and it says, this ordinance shall not be construed to limit any remedies available under local, state, or federal law. So again, this is another avenue for a remedy between the two parties, if this was to come between two parties, before it would ever get to court.
Correct.
Are there any questions on sections A, B, C, or D under enforcement? Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. Actually, this is a question for legal staff. Jennifer, under section B, are we set up currently with our municipal court to be able to handle this?
Councilmember Fry, this process would require some steps, I think, to consider whether we need to adopt a charter ordinance, whether we need to provide municipal court to become a court of record. This doesn't contain a statute of limitations. It's different from the Kansas state law acts against discrimination. So to answer your question, we're not set up at this time for this ordinance.
Is there a follow-up question? Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify as well that the language here on the enforcement language, that is fairly standard for non-discrimination ordinances, not just in the state of Kansas municipalities, but also in other states as well. And what the expectation, I guess, is that then city law department will develop the necessary procedures for enforcement.
And can you tell me how many cities in Kansas already have something like this on the books? Just off the top of your head. I think it's at least 6. But is it more?
I am moving over to Equality Kansas from Glisson, Kansas, so I can tell you how many school districts have inclusive non-discrimination ordinances, and that's fewer than 10 out of all 280 districts.
So my understanding is we have at least 6 cities.
We have very few cities. I believe it's 6.
Yes, I believe we have 6 cities that have an ordinance like this put in place, and I'm just with you all there, is there any
There's actually 20 cities.
Oh, 20 cities.
20.
There were 6 in Johnson County. That might have been where I got that. Okay.
Yeah, and there were 6. A year ago, we had advertised quite a lot through Glisson, Kansas. There were 6 school districts that had non-discrimination statements.
Well, I'm glad you guys
that might have been
have the information. So we have 20 cities that were able to pass this, and their legal departments were able to accommodate. And is there any notion that the accommodation by the legal department, any of those 20 cities in Kansas was?
So my opinion is that if Fairway, Kansas City, Lawrence, Leawood, Lenexa, Manhattan, Merriam, Mission Hills, Mission Woods, Olathe, Overland Park, Pittsburgh, Prairie Village, Roland Park, Shawnee, Topeka, Westwood, and Westwood Hills can figure out a way to do this with their legal department, so can the great city of Wichita.
Agreed. Councilmember Tuttle.
Ordinances cover over 1 million Kansas residents
who are enjoying the benefits of this that Wichita residents currently do not have. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And I want to make a clarifying statement that I'm going to ask some questions, and asking questions is not a bad thing, right? That means that people care, that we're interested, that we want to get to the best resolution. And sometimes posing questions is perceived by some as being negative or critical or not supportive, and I just want to make the statement from the beginning, this is investigating.
As long as you don't ask if I want to marry a dog.
I promise I won't. Also, in a normal setting, I would have vetted many of these questions prior to getting to the bench, right? So just want to make that clarifying statement. So I'm not sure if this would go to legal or to city manager, but my first question is, where would the fines go? So let's say that we have employers or housing or something, whose coffers do those fines go into?
Well, at this time, the ordinance as proposed does not address that, and it's not clear what our authority to enforce this as a judgment would be in district court. Those are just some questions we would need to answer.
Okay, so then my next question is, I completely respect when the speaker said that, fines sometimes hit people the most, right? Your time and your treasure are the most valued things you have often, and so I'm not opposed to fines, but I'm also curious if there's an opportunity for education in this anywhere. I didn't see that, and if I missed it upon first blush, like I said, we just got it last night, but I think that it's always been this council's thought, and I can't speak for anyone but myself, but even when we were doing the masking ordinance back in July, we really tried to emphasize education as an opportunity, not saying not have a fine, but is there an education component as well? And again, I know it's not in here, but is that something that could be discussed? Because if somebody violates it and we don't give them corrective options, they're probably just going to do the same thing again. Hope not, right? But I think it's a missed opportunity not to provide some sort of education for people who are discriminating and demonstrating inappropriate behavior.
Right, I'm going to ask one of our lobbyists, Liz Hamer, to address this, because prior to her role as lobbyist with Equality Kansas, she was with Glisson, which is an education network that does this kind of work.
So I think I'm going to try to stay focused and not go on all the tangents for this, answer that question. The first thing I want to say is that in the Cadillac version of this policy, there is something with the Wichita Human Rights Commission that would provide for more education, more restorative practices in there as well. And so that kind of may answer your question. But in addition, I do have an education background as an educator in Glisson, Kansas, and we worked with schools to ensure that LGBTQ students felt safe, valued, and respected at school. Equality Kansas is working with community partners and other organizations to start providing some programs like that, but there are also many organizations in Wichita right now that do education.
So would that be woven into this at all, or is it, and I'm familiar with Glisson's work and used to work at the health department and with the LGBT Health Coalition. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So thank you for that, but some opportunity. Then I just have one more question, and this may be for staff, so I'm sorry, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth.
Ask a follow-up question, and I'll recognize you for that question.
I'm sorry?
Can I ask a follow-up question that's germane to the question in which is on the table?
Sure, yeah.
Would Equality Kansas or one of the other organizations that I think you guys work alongside with be willing, in your opinion, to work with a diversity, inclusion, and civil rights council that right now is getting, it is in place. We have folks appointed, and part of their role, once they're not up and running yet, they're still working out the bylaws and working Wichita State, but once they start setting that agenda to ensure that Wichita, we are living the values that we want, that we expect Wichita to live, that they would work with them to help with that education component, which would hopefully avoid the usage of this. But would those organizations be willing, and your organization be willing to work with our Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Board for help with education?
I feel like I should maybe give that to the chair as a membership organization. But yes, I believe that our organization would be happy to work with and advise on some of those pieces, even be contracted out to provide education and do the work with other organizations that are doing it so that we can make sure that the work is intersectional, so that it covers sexual orientation, gender identity, race, religion, disability, and all of those pieces.
Excellent. Councilmember Tuttle, the floor is returned.
Thank you, and I think this is going to go to legal, and I'm not even sure if it's a question, it's kind of a statement, but just something that I think needs to be considered as an appeals process. Through anything, if you're found guilty of something, usually you have the ability to talk to somebody else. When we had our ethics policy discussion, that was something that we were interested in. So, again, if I'm not seeing it, I apologize, but I don't see any sort of, I was found guilty, now I've been given a fine, but I think that somebody didn't hear my case correctly, or I still have a voice or something. Jennifer, can you speak to that? Thank you.
I don't see that appeals process in this ordinance. That's something that could be considered if this was to be the direction of council, but I don't see it in what's been provided.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember, well, first, I just want to follow up with the question for legal about the concerns with fines. Do we have, because my understanding is we pass the policy and then it's administered. Is it common to have a direction of where fines go when violations of other ordinances, if people are found guilty and they do due process and have to pay a fine? Is that commonly handled at the bench, or is that more handled on the administration side as we administrate this into practice?
Well, I think generally municipal court fines are for criminal offenses, and they go to the municipal court, the general fund. This is a different, type of enforcement, so I don't want to speak for the budget process. I think we just need clarification.
Okay, but it's if we pass this, we could work towards that. Is that correct?
You could earmark it if you wanted to.
If we wanted to, but if we didn't want it, if we just kept it the way it is, there's no way to slow this down at this point. Because the fines aren't directed towards a particular pot, I guess. Is that an accurate statement? Right? Thank you. Councilmember Bubach.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just a couple questions from staff here. My over 8 years on the bench, I've never seen us get anything like this without the public getting it. We've got former council members emailing us and stuff and asking for more information. Has staff dug into this? Have we had any communications with ICMA or NLC about other people that have, other cities that have had a similar ordinance, or do we have any additional background information or benchmarking information?
So I'll let the mayor and Jennifer correct me if I've got this wrong, but the initial ordinance that was proposed was patterned after an ordinance adopted in Topeka. And the reason we didn't make a presentation is because my understanding was there wasn't support to go in that direction, and an alternative had been presented yesterday that law department has just done an initial review on. So we've not, if you've asked, have we vetted this against other or with other groups? What's in front of you today, we have not. I believe that what you heard is that the groups that prepared the ordinance in front of you today have benefit of looking and working with other jurisdictions.
So, and I just want to clarify that response, because you asked for clarification if needed. Last night, my understanding is there was a legal memo sent out. Was that sent out to every member of the council, and was that prepared by our legal staff?
Yes, it was.
So the changes, the main changes to this is these 1, 2, 3, 4 small sections that make up less than half a page. That part was actually reviewed by staff, and a memo was sent out yesterday.
That is correct. That was a very initial preliminary high-level review. There is more review that would be appropriate.
Okay, but it was reviewed. Okay, Councilmember Bluebach.
I just wanted to add, as an SME, Topeka is the only one of the cities, of that long list of cities that I named, that does not have enforcement policies. All of the other 19 cities do have enforcement policies.
Which is why we're so glad that you were able to point out this, and the process worked, where the agenda goes public on Wednesday, and then it gets community feedback from stakeholders and from other members of the community, and it gives us an opportunity to fix it, which it seems we have done. Councilmember Clayco.
Thank you. I think Dr. Wilkes answered my question, but I just want to verify. Of the 20 ordinances that are in all the cities, they're not all the same, right? Topeka doesn't have enforcement. The other 19 have enforcement, but they're not all this exact policy.
That is correct,
Okay.
not the exact same language. I will say I think we're benefiting from the timing and the expertise of HRC. This is...
yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
I'd hope lessons learned, right? Thank you.
And I'm happy to speak on, if necessary, or if invited, on the importance of having those enforcement policies too. I don't know if you all are on board with that part of it, but Equality Kansas as an organization, we've learned from some of our mistakes, and the leadership coach and consultant in me is very transparent about mistakes and learning from our mistakes. I think that's part of leadership. And in 2006, we passed a statewide bullying prevention policy for schools that had no enforcement in it, and we've spent the ensuing time, the last, 14 years, working on, no, that's more than that, I can't math today, 15 years, working, too long, but working on getting better enforcement, but because what we found was that school districts were not implementing the policy. There were no teeth in it, there was no enforcement. Most of the school districts did not implement. A lot of them didn't have any of the other pieces in it to allow students ways to report bullying if it was happening. There were just no other pieces for recourse for students who were being bullied. And we've spent a long time trying to fix that mistake. We just don't want to see that happen again with policy, and so that's why we are really strongly suggesting that enforcement be included in here. And I can tell you more about that whole situation.
Well, and that's just why I'm so grateful that you reached out to us over the last few days to work with us on this, so we didn't follow those same mistakes and walk down that same path and have to play catch up and not have a strong policy. So we appreciate that. With that, my board doesn't show that there's more folks to ask questions of the content experts. So if there aren't more questions for the content expert, if you would stand by in case questions come up. But if not, I will open up the floor to folks who would like to who would like to speak to this and possibly tell their own experiences. So we thank you.
I would like to add that my original intent to come here, as well as that of Ms. Hamer, was to offer testimony as to our personal stories, and in addition to being a subject matter expert, we would still like to do that, please.
Of course, Doctor. And we'll give you a chance to take a break if you like, and then we will make sure that we recognize you again. Are there members of the public who would like to come speak to this? And the way this works is usually this is the 5 minutes. We want to make sure it's your time. And so there might be a question at the end is to clarify maybe something that was said. But this is your time to speak to us and to this policy. We do ask that you are able to and willing to say your full name and your address so that we can put it on the record. But if not, of course, we understand.
Sure. My name is Reverend Jackie Carter. I am the senior pastor at Table of Hope Metropolitan Community Church, which is in District 1. My personal residence, I'm not comfortable giving you my address because I've had many, many threats at my home. I am an openly out, queer, highly educated senior pastor of Metropolitan Community Church. It is the first and original church for people who are marginalized in this city. I operate one of the largest food pantries in this town on a weekly basis. I deal with every one of these people that is mentioned in this discrimination clause. People that are purple and pink and brown and any color of skin that you can imagine, and that have money and don't have money, and have jobs and don't have jobs, and are same gender loving and heterosexual, but on the down low they have 3 other men that they're having relations with, or 2 other women or whatever. And not once in my 15 years of pastoring this church have I asked someone, so who do you sleep with? So that I can make my judgment about whether I feed you or whether you matter to me. It is my opinion that every single person that we meet is a unique and unrepeatable gift of God. And all I'm called to do is to love them. And I have some pretty strict requirements that, for me, come from sacred texts that say I'm supposed to love everybody. And what this ordinance does is, this ordinance creates a way that I can say to the grandmothers who are calling me and saying, my child had strawberries thrown at them at the grocery store, or my daughter got kicked out of their apartment. And if you don't think those things happen in Wichita, Kansas, you're living under a rock, because they still do. We still have landlords that don't want same gender loving folks to stay in their properties. We still have bosses who don't want you to, it's okay if you are same gender loving as long as you don't bring that person or you don't talk anything about it. When I wanted to go to seminary 20 years ago in Kansas City, Missouri, it was fine for me to go to St. Paul's School of Theology as long as I didn't talk about it, as long as I didn't tell them who I really was. And what this ordinance does is it will allow all of these folks to live authentically as who they are, so that they're not hiding in a bottle of alcohol or an order of pills or 14 plants of weed that they have to keep in their backyard because they're, whatever. So I commend you, and I ask you to please do the next right thing, which is to make certain that every one of your constituents, every single person that lives in this city, and there will be some, you are going to have some backlash, I promise you, because I get it every day. And you're going to have some backlash, but you know what the right thing to do is. You don't need me to tell you. You don't need Carrie or Liz or Stephanie or anybody else to tell you. You know what you're supposed to do. You know good and well that we should be honoring and respecting every single person that lives in this city. We should be finding ways for them to be successful, not to put them in a place where they can't be successful. And so I encourage you to do the work. It's going to take some work. This isn't perfect. Everything hasn't been laid out for you. What are we going to do with the fines? Where are we going to do this? We can figure it out. We're smart people. You all were elected to this position because you can think, you know, and you have the ability to make a difference in this city if you'll do this. So I really beg you. I beg you from the bottom of my heart. I've had too many threats. I've had too many broken windows at my church. If you don't believe it, go back and read the news reports. Hundreds of windows at our church broken out. And we feed over 1,200 people a week. And not one of them asked me who I sleep with. Not one. I can't imagine.
Pastor, just for a point of clarification, we really appreciate your story and you bringing your not just experience, but also it seems that you have experience pastoring and utilizing pastoral care with members of the community in which this seeks to protect. And is it fair to say, based on your presentation, that some of these folks are self-medicating and that suffering from perhaps trauma for the way that they might be treated? And you are hearing about that, but we might not be because we don't have a vehicle for those stories to come forward. Is it?
I'm the one that gets called to the hospital to try to do the funeral arrangements for the, I just did last week, suicide. You know, I've got 2 kids now, one in just outside of Wichita and one in Wichita, 19 and 16, you know, tried to commit suicide. So I understand this isn't, you know, this is a small part of our city, and these people are yet your constituents. They're still people that, in my opinion, are a unique and unrepeatable gift of God, and we need to do something to protect them. We should have learned through COVID that we are not good at knowing that we're supposed to take care of each other. We had to make an ordinance to tell people to wear a doggone face mask to keep each other safe. We couldn't. People wouldn't do it without an ordinance. And then they were screaming and yelling at clerks in Walmart. And I've never seen people act in such a way about wearing a little piece of cloth over their face to keep somebody else safe. You know, we ought to know by now. We are not good at respecting each other and taking care of each other. So until we learn how to do that, it's going to take a law.
And Pastor, just one follow-up question, and then I think another member might have a question for you. In your professional experience mentoring and pastoring to folks who have been victims, do you feel that an ordinance such as this, not only just a gesture from the city, but actual law that will say that it will be a violation of our city ordinance if you were to actively discriminate against someone based on who they are when it comes to housing, accommodation, and public services? Do you think this would have a positive effect on perhaps some of the people that you pastors to's own mental health and own?
I think it is the first step. I think it is the first step and the way we need to go. Just saying, please be nice to each other, and if you don't, well, you know, the city really wants you to. I just said, we've seen where that gets us, nowhere. We have a tremendous amount of people. You know, we've spent years having politicians and pastors stand in places of power and tell us that not all of God's people mattered. Depending on skin color and income and job and any kind of way that you can think about separating people, whether you're baptized or whether you're not, and whether you read the Bible this way or you read the Bible that way, then, you know, we draw all kinds of lines and say those people don't matter. Whether you speak English, you know, for God's sakes, you're in our country, you should speak English. Well, and yet when we read those sacred texts, we're told that we're supposed to invite the stranger. So you know what you need to do, and I hope that you have the courage to do it.
Thank you. Councilmember Bubag.
Thank you, Mayor and Pastor. I'm sorry to hear about your discrimination you went through, but I want to make sure that we all understand the ordinance in front of us, especially us voting members. And I want to know that the example you gave about a landlord denying someone for being a same-sex couple or whatever. Jennifer, is that addressed in this, or it was my understanding this was only for maybe city housing, but I just want to make sure I understand the ordinance.
This ordinance as drafted would provide protection in 3 areas: employment, public accommodation, and then property transactions, which includes rental or housing. So not just city business, but within the city limits.
So anybody that does business in the city?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So any landlord can't discriminate and kick someone out based off race, based off LGBTQ, based off the person who they legally married. Is that a good, if this passes, without having to either mediate such discrimination with the person in which they inflicted that discrimination on, or have to face a fine? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And it would be criminal? Civil?
These are civil penalties, I think, the way it's drafted.
Right.
But it would be enforceable in our municipal court.
This is similar to what the state law provides under the Kansas Acts Against Discrimination.
Okay. How does this coincide with our fair housing laws, or how does it coincide with the Kansas Landlord Tenant Act?
Yeah, I haven't had time to look into all those intersections, but there are federal agencies and state agencies that do enforce federal and state laws in this area. For instance, the Kansas Human Rights Commission enforces the Kansas Acts Against Discrimination in areas of employment, housing, and public accommodation. Federal agencies enforce the federal laws. So I don't know exactly what fair housing, what their jurisdiction is on this particular area, but
is this already addressed in the Kansas Landlord Act, or do we know?
I don't believe the Kansas Landlord Act addresses it, but I have not looked at that since receiving this.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like additional information on that.
Sure. I will say the Kansas Human Rights Commission issued a position statement last fall, and it may be good to confer with the Kansas Human Rights Commission that they enforce these laws according to the current Supreme Court ruling. It might be something to consider to confer with that agency.
So again, and I just want to, because we already discussed, went through this section, these like 5 sentences that were added that we already have a legal memo on, and the subject matter experts both locally and nationally have said that the enforcement from the state level and the current laws is not enough to cover what needs to be covered. That 20 other cities are doing. So I do want to point that out, and that's why our original, which was going to not have enforcement at the local level, but at the state level, has been deemed inaccurate or
Inadequate.
Inadequate. Thank you, Pastor. When trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish today. Thank you, Pastor. We appreciate it. Councilmember Tuttle.
And this is more just a clarifying statement because we're like the only 7 people that have these documents, and people are asking me questions. So I had a question, and this isn't for Pastor Ducky, and it's great to see you again, by the way. Thank you for all you do. I really appreciate it. But just for the community who may be watching, this is not just for LGBT. Somebody asked me that, so I would just like to clarify that it's discrimination based on age, color, disability, familial status, gender identity, genetic information, national origin or ancestry, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, and veteran status.
And veteran status is a very important one that we added to this, yes. Who's the next person who would like to speak to this? Sir, welcome.
Hi, I'm Javen Gonzalez. I live in District 1, 316 North Chautauqua. So I took off work today because this is important, not just for the city of Wichita and for us in the LGBTQ community, but this affects everyone, but some of us are affected more than others. Most of you, this isn't going to affect as much. You don't. I'm guessing that many of you have pictures of your family in your office, of your kids, of your spouses, and you don't give it a second thought. It's just a thing that you do. You move into a new office, you put your pictures up. But for many Wichitans, this is not a reality. This is not something that they just go into work and do. They just put the pictures up. They have to give it a second thought. I know many of you, don't understand that feeling. One of you might understand how difficult that might be. You have to think about what the people at work are going to think, what the people around me are going to think. And so, these simple things that many of you may take for granted, they're not a reality for everybody. And, I have friends who are in long-term relationships with their spouses for years, and they don't disclose that at work because they're scared of retaliation from their coworkers. They're scared that their bosses aren't going to give them the raise. They're scared that they're not going to, be able to do the things that everybody else does. I have friends who go and they don't go together to go look at houses, for renting houses. They're going to live there together, but they don't go because they don't want to risk not being rented to. So I'm proud to see that Wichita is sponsoring a Pride fair later this year, or later this month. And, organizing that with the LGBT community is great, elevating queer artists is great, but there's a joke in the gay community that corporations in the month of June change their logos, they make it rainbow, they make it flag, it's all happy and joyous, and then July 1st, it's gone. It's sad. They don't do anything else besides a little show of good faith. So that's what I'm asking you now, is that don't be the joke. You're hosting the Pride Festival, but put the policy behind it to back it up. Show that you really care about the LGBTQ community in Wichita. I emailed a lot of you yesterday, actually most of you, and I got responses from 2 of you. There were some concerns about enforcement. One of you, Councilmember Claycomb, was concerned that there wasn't enough enforcement on there, so I'm hoping that with the new amendments that's something that you're going to support, because I know that was something that you were worried about. But, I'm asking you to not kick it further down the road. I'm afraid that, like other things, if it doesn't get passed now, it's never going to get passed. It's going to get forgotten, and maybe some of you, that's what you want. You want it to just disappear and go away. It's not something that you want to take the vote on. It's not something that you are comfortable doing. But, I really hope that you show today and you signal to all Wichitans that they matter, regardless of their sex, their race, age, sexual orientation, gender identity. We're all Wichitans, we're all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion from the public? Representative, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Byers, 119 South Chautauqua Avenue, and I am in District 1. And I'm here today to talk to you a little bit, not as my role as a state representative, but as my role as a citizen of Wichita. To give a historical context, I am 58 years old, which means that I was a child in the 60s, an adolescent in the 70s, became an adult in the 80s, became a parent in the 90s. So I have seen a lot of the things that have happened as far as civil rights and acceptance goes in this country. And I'm proud to say that our country keeps moving forward and we're able to do things better and better. At one point in time in my life, as a second grader, my family were traveling in a western state, walked into a gas station, my dad asked for the keys to the restroom, and we were told, "Are y'all Injun?" And my dad proudly announced that we were Chickasaw, we are Native Americans from Oklahoma. And the station attendant said, "Well, you might be nice people, but I just don't like Injuns in my bathrooms. You'll have to go someplace else." I understand that discrimination. As a trans woman, I understand that discrimination as well in other areas. When my wife and I walk into a restaurant, we do not know if a server is going to politely serve us or look at us and make comments about us. Those accommodations, whether it be in a restroom or it be sitting at a table, or heaven forbid something came up and we had to sell our house and turn around and go into the rental market, those things that they took place, we need to know that we can be protected, that we have the right to housing, that we can be consumers of this country and be able to do so in such a way that it's not thrown out against us. The enforcement possibilities of this ordinance are very important because, as a former teacher, I understand when you make rules, if students don't know what's the consequence for violating those rules, they will push and push and push and try and cross the line repeatedly. But if they understand there's a consequence for that action immediately, it gives them pause to think, a moment to take a breath and go, what happens if I do this? When we're talking about discrimination, we're not talking about someone throwing a pencil across a classroom. We're talking about someone's human dignity and making sure that people understand that there is a consequence for those actions when you don't treat people with kindness. And that's really what this comes down to, treating people with kindness. and making sure that their rights are affirmed. In October of 2019, I stood outside the state U.S. Supreme Court and spoke at a rally where they were hearing arguments on Bostock versus Clayton County, which is the case that has changed how we interpret Title VII and the 64 Civil Rights Act on the basis of sex, so that it now includes gender identity and sexual orientation. But that doesn't cover accommodations. All it simply covers is employment. It only covers employment of companies that are large enough to be covered by the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. This is where we talk about why this is so important that we have these enforcement capabilities. Because as a country, we're not there yet. The Kansas Act Against Discrimination does not include sexual orientation or gender identity. The Kansas Human Rights Commission has said they will interpret that, but that commission is subject to the whim of the governor. A new governor, and that can change. And so we need to make sure that what we have here in Wichita shows that the state and the city that we are willing to be a leader for all communities, and that we can stand firm for supporting everyone who lives in this great city.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Representative, one quick question. You mentioned the employers. Do you have a number on that? Employers of a size of 10 or 15 employees or higher, or do you know what that is specifically?
I believe that you'd have to check with the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. I want to say it's 40 employees or larger, okay. But don't quote me on that. I'm a retired band director, so that would be something I have to look up.
Okay, so anyone under whatever that number actually is wouldn't be covered by those protections?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Is there further discussion? Or excuse me, further questions for the company? Thank you. Further input from the public. Ms. Casey. What an honor to have you, Ms. Casey. Thank you.
Well, hello, you beautiful people. My name is Karen Casey. I'm District 1. And although I'm not of the LGBTQ community, I know all about discrimination. I'm 81 years old and still being discriminated against by people all over this world. Some of you are in here. It's time that we put that behind us. And just because people are different than us, you don't have the right to judge them. You need to go ahead and protect these people against discrimination. I won't see it in my day that you will protect me, but preferably you will protect them. Do the right thing. And every now and then, you that call yourself Christians, you need to crack your Bible every now and then. And don't just read it, study it. God says he loves everybody. Everybody. And we're only here for a little while. So do the right thing. Pass this. And let these people live in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Gates. Next speaker, please.
So I've been up here as a subject matter expert, and now I want to speak to you a little more from the heart. I'm happy to go back into subject matter expert mode as well. But I've been doing advocacy for and with the LGBTQ community since my calling found me when I was a ministry leader in my church. And I didn't think I was going to start crying this quickly.
The floor is yours, and you may take your time.
Thank you. I want to first start with a quote by Audre Lorde, because even though I'm standing here before you as a white bisexual woman who's part of this work, I carry with me so many other people's stories, just like Pastor Jackie Carter. And Audre Lorde is a self-described Black mother lesbian poet And she said, "There's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives." And so on this day that's sandwiched between the Pulse Massacre, and that's why I'm wearing this necklace today, because I'm bringing the energy of hope, love, and unity in this 49 pieces of a rainbow heart from when 49 lives were lost in a vicious attack in Florida on LGBTQ folks, predominantly LGBTQ folks of color. We're sandwiched here, and then this coming weekend is Juneteenth. And I have so many Black LGBTQ friends in this community whose stories I carry with me, too. So I just wanted to take a moment to honor them and their stories as I talk about why these policies are so important. When anybody is discriminated against, it chips away at who they are, right? You will hear testimony about that. In fact, I'm pretty sure you all know people and have heard stories about that. And that's why we see social, emotional, and health disparities. I believe it's why I was originally invited to the Health Coalition to be part of that, to help reach and educate on the health disparities for the LGBTQ population. But there's so much overlap for our LGBTQ students of color, for our LGBTQ students with disabilities. And this policy, a non-discrimination policy, can protect them in all parts of their identity. And you can't piece out those parts of their identities. It's so important that they are able to be seen in their whole entirety, their whole identities. Just a few things, I guess, to kind of mention. Doing this work for so long, I have become, I guess, a safe space, I hope, or a brave space for people to share their stories and to ask advice. And I can't share all their stories with you today. For one, they're not all my short stories to share. And two, we'd be here for days. But I want to help be that conductor, that network is my word, to those stories if you need to hear some, if you need people to hear their stories of discrimination and how it has affected them. But just last weekend, a mother reached out to me, a friend of mine reached out to me. Her child is Black, middle school, and transgender, and he needed a swimsuit. He wants to swim in a public pool, and he needs a suit that he can feel like he can show up authentically in. But she didn't have the funds for it because gender-neutral swimsuits are a little pricey. And so we rallied. We asked some friends, we kept it anonymous, but her child deserves to be able to go to a public pool and not worry about discrimination and know that if he is discriminated against in a city pool, that there are protections for him in place. It's hard enough, I think, for the Black mamas to raise Black children in Wichita. We know that there is a lot of discrimination still. I know that there's a lot of discrimination still here based on race. And to have that added layer of him being transgender as well, and knowing the hostility against trans kids. I've spent my last 7 years working with LGBTQ youth. Unfortunately, we have had to bury and hold vigils for several of the youth because this world is hostile to them. And in the GLSEN world, in the education world, we know with statistics that non-discrimination policies that are LGBT inclusive save lives. Ordinances are so important. They give a statement that we're not going to allow discrimination here. They help set the tone, and the enforcement pieces are also so necessary. But I would love to see Wichita not just do some rainbow washing for Pride Month, but also set the tone in our city that discrimination of any kind is not welcome here, and that those who are discriminated against, when they're discriminated against, the city is going to have their back. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome again, Doctor.
Carrie Wilkes from District 2. I wanted to speak as a woman, and as a resident of this city, and not just as a subject matter expert, I think it's important that we all understand what this might mean to people out here in our community. The tears that my friend Liz Hamer shed are real. There is pain. I put on a public face so many times and give speeches to cover up the fear of the hatred, of the death threats, of the people that say I am less than. A fear I didn't know when my parents brought me into this world as a privileged white person that some might say is overly educated. I cried in my pastor's arms when people said, "You cannot get married, you will lower my property taxes." I sat at rehearsal for the church choir and I sobbed because I was with people that knew me and knew what discrimination was like, and I was safe. And then I put on my smile, and I put on my courage, and I put on my warrior activism, and I went back to work. Mayor, council members, there is someone out there that needs you. There is someone that doesn't have the courage to stand up here and talk and is hovering in shame and silence, whether it is in the bottle, whether they're about to take their own life. They need you. You hear a lot about LGBTQ people today because we are the only group that is not in other ordinances, other laws. That does not mean that other people are not worthy. And God help you if you are an LGBTQ person of color. God help you if you are an LGBT person that identifies as trans and is a person of color. I do not exaggerate when I say there is a war against our trans youth. These protections would matter. They would save lives. I was going to talk to you about the benefits to the economy. I've presented before you all before, not your faces, they were different. Reverend Jackie Carter and I came up and asked for an NDO. We were told it wasn't needed. We watched as the mayor spoke to TV cameras and said, "Nope, not in this city, not needed." How many lives have been lost because this was not needed? And that's why I'm not just talking about the economic impact, but boy, there are studies that show that. And if you'd like for me to get my research hat on, I will bring them all. But I'd like to think that some things matter more than a pocketbook. I'd like to think that I matter. I'd like to think that the children that I mentor and that come to me because they're thrown out of their homes and they have nowhere else to go matter. As I tend to say when I speak at rallies, hate is not a Kansas value. I implore you to pass an ordinance with enforcement policies.
Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak? there any questions? There's no questions and no further speakers from the public. Therefore, we'll bring discussion back to the bench. Is there further discussion? There is no further discussion. Councilmember Blako.
I'll withdraw it. That's okay.
If there is no further discussion, then I'll make a motion that we accept the version of the non-discriminatory ordinance that only added 8 sentences for under enforcement that was kindly dubbed the Honda Plan, and that legal has provided a legal memo for, that we would add this to our ordinance and that this will pass out today. We now have someone on board for a comment, so I will withhold my motion. Councilmember Blako.
Thank you. I want to thank Equality Kansas and others for being here today and for your work and presenting information today. I do support a non-discrimination policy, so I want to say that at first. But today we have 3 policies in front of us, and only one of which has been reviewed by the citizens. We as a council had little time to review the 2 presented today because we received them late yesterday, and it is council policy that items be in our agenda by noon on Friday. These were very moving stories today, and again, as I say, I support a non-discrimination policy, but if they are not in our packet, they are not to be added. And it is unfair to the residents of our city who want to read and reflect and comment on items that are in the city council agenda. Ordinance changes of this magnitude should go through channels for community input. None of these proposed ordinances have gone through normal channels. They have not gone through our district advisory boards, or any other boards that have a stake in this policy. And in this case, we have a Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Board, and I'm frustrated that we spent so much time creating this board to merely bypass them for their deliberations and recommendations. And I agree with Reverend Carter that we can work this out. I do, and that's why we have these citizens advisory boards. These community input channels are in place because of calls from the community for more transparency in what we discuss and what we vote on from the bench. And I find it disingenuous to talk about transparency and then just ignore it because it doesn't fit an agenda. So again, I do support a non-discrimination policy, but I think the public and certainly the stakeholders that are listed as protected classes in these proposed ordinances should have the time to weigh in, and we're just not giving them that opportunity. And I find that very difficult to deal with at this point.
So staff, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, all but 8 sentences was presented on Monday to every member of this board. Am I wrong that every member of this board not only had access to every page of this document minus the 8 sentences that we went over and could have at that time asked for the item to be pulled from the agenda, and no one asked? Is that a fair statement?
No. No.
I think it's, yeah. The fair statement is that the initial ordinance was provided to the council, I think, on Wednesday, if I remember right. And
so I had an email on the 7th, which is Monday, in which you sent out an email saying what we were going to go over on this council. And in that email on Monday the 7th, this ordinance, or the initial ordinance that just lacked these 8 sentences, was on that email. Is that a correct statement?
yes, Mayor, but that didn't go to the entire council. That went to the mayor, vice mayor, and Councilmember Clayco for review of consent items.
So Councilmember Clayco actually had access on Monday, knowing that this was going to be up. Is that? Yes. Okay. So with that,
And I see here that this ordinance that was presented publicly on Monday, this is an amendment to that ordinance. It even strikes the language that the content experts say we shouldn't have, which means this is based on, minus the 8 sentences that we already went through, this is based on what the entire public had access to on Wednesday. And then we went through this entire weekend. Did anyone during that weekend ask for clarification or ask for any more information on the ordinance?
Mayor, no, but in fairness, this enforcement language wasn't provided to anyone until yesterday.
Right, it's 8 sentences.
Right.
We make amendments up here that aren't even written down or gone through subject matter experts. We do that all the time up here. Are we going to now start, I guess, sending back to or tabling stuff if we have an amendment that's just made off the cuff from the bench, especially one in which has all the subject matter experts? So it is a absolutely 100% valid statement that all but 8 sentences has been given with over days of review. No one's asked me. No one's texted me, shot me an email saying that they need further clarification of anything. But these 8 sentences, how long do people need to read these 8 sentences which we have already read before you can agree that discrimination shouldn't be tolerated? How long does it take? Do you want a week? Do you want me to call a special meeting on Friday? Will that give you enough time? Tell me what to do so we can get this done. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. Regarding the 8 sentences, I had questions, and I agree with Reverend Jackie. We can work it out, and we will, but we can't pass something and then work it out later, right? You gotta do it right kind of the first time. So my questions regarding the 8 sentences that really do matter, because it's the change, but it's the teeth, right? And so we want to make sure the teeth are right. We don't pass we try not to pass things that are aspirational and we'll work it out later. So please, no, I heard you and I agree with you. But my questions were, where did the fines go? Because I think that matters. I think that could be a statement. I don't know if it's potentially to help with initiatives with the Diversity, Inclusion, Civil Rights Advisory Board. I don't know, but I think that matters, or at least it matters to me, and if it doesn't to anyone else, I'm sorry. And then I am still concerned about some sort of appeal process, because whether we like it or not, sometimes people have nefarious intentions. And I would just want to make sure that all of our residents are being protected. We want to protect the most vulnerable populations that are listed in this ordinance. I could not concur more. But I also think we need to have some sort of mechanism to protect everyone. So, again, 8 sentences were added, but I have questions regarding those to make sure that if we're going to do it, we try and do it right. And then I just want to echo what Councilmember Claycomb said. It's been said from folks on this bench that we should practice the policy of engagement first and policy second, and we missed that this time. We heard from content experts and people who are subject matter experts and incredibly passionate about this, but I would have also liked to had the opportunity to get feedback from veterans groups and the aging group and other folks. And so during this meeting, I'm having texts and I'm seeing on YouTube and other things, people saying, we didn't get to see the policy, we didn't get to weigh in. And for me, I think that is just a missed opportunity. Maybe somebody else had really good comments that they would have thought of to make it even better. So we are beholden as elected officials to get input from our community members and constituents. That's our job, is to listen to our constituents. And so I just feel that we missed the opportunity to hear from our constituents this time. But again, I'm not going to be opposed. I think we need an ordinance. I'm absolutely fine with that, but I just have questions that haven't been answered. And as I said, I think we should practice engagement first and policy second in the future. Thank you.
Councilmember Frye.
So Jennifer, regarding this, I mean, do we wordsmith it? Do we do a friendly amendment? I mean, how do we, is it, I don't know the process.
I mean, if it were to be adopted today, it would need, to answer your question about fines, it would need clarification if you want to earmark those funds in the deferred vote.
And the appeal process, a potential appeal process.
Yes, and there also is a question of, as to statute of limitations, when these need to be filed by.
So we would need only if we earmark it, want to earmark those funds. Is that correct, the way you just said?
So on to that specific question, I believe so.
I think the question was, do we need to wordsmith it as far as fees go, or as far as fines to people who have been found guilty of discriminating against folks? We can pass this without earmarking it, but if we wanted to earmark those funds, we could do that. But it still would be, you guys could handle the administration of this if we chose not to earmark those funds today. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you. Been on this council 6 years. Some of you are new to me from earlier first term. But I think between my first term and my second term, I've learned that this council has always believed in making this the best city it can possibly be. And that means being inviting, welcoming, and inclusive. And hopefully what we're talking about today gets us to something that's better than just good enough. I think the questions demonstrate that we're concerned about doing something that is proper and helps all the marginalized people feel welcomed and invited. I'm concerned that many of our neighbors have not seen these documents, have not been contacted, or these proposed ordinances, and even though it's just 8 sentences, those 8 sentences have weight to them. We typically do this to build coalitions, get feedback, or consensus, and to develop refinements to make it better. Right now, this feels, ironically enough, not inclusive. We're leaving people out. As I said before, what happened to engagement first, policy second? Are we ensuring that everyone is equally represented and has the opportunity to be heard? We formed a Diversity, Inclusion, and Civil Rights Board earlier this year. They are still working on getting established and haven't had the opportunity to give us feedback. It's been mentioned our DABs or any other groups outside of Equality Kansas. And I certainly appreciate you being here and helping draft this. But you're one group, and there are many groups that need to be heard. And I think you're hearing from this council and some of the questions that are being asked, let's get it right in something that's just not good enough, but aspirationally as best it can be.
So I'm just going to add to that. Every news station has reported on this weekend. Every news outlet, including the Wichita Eagle, has reported on this. And I don't know if it was front page, but I bet it was well placed. Front page. Not one person came here today to argue against this. We had people come here today, subject matter experts and people whose lives are impacted by this, who mentor and pastor to children who are dealing with their children committing suicide because we don't have something like this. So the idea that we need to put this out, because there might be, maybe a group who wants to come in and argue against an ordinance to protect people from discrimination that 20 other cities have passed, I find that just not a good enough reason to vote against this ordinance that should have been done already. Councilmember Tuttle, you don't have the floor, sir. Get on the board, you get the floor. Sir, you do not have the floor. You need to push your button and be recognized. Councilmember Tuttle is on the floor, and she is an equal member.
Transparency.
Councilmember
Why
Tuttle,
are you objecting to transparency?
Order.
That's the question.
Order. Councilmember Tuttle, you have the floor. Sir, push your button and you can have the floor. Councilmember Tuttle, thank you for pushing your button, following the standards set by this body. You have the floor.
Is everyone else hearing that, or is it just me? Okay. Again, you know, I think sometimes I beat a dead horse and I need to know when to dismount. But I have to say it. The reason that the fantastic speakers are here today is because you were aware of this and the additions, right? You had the luxury of being involved in the process. You had the luxury of being involved in the process this weekend. And during this meeting, I'm hearing from people, should I wait? I'll start over. Okay.
Want to try again?
Yours seems to work.
Is mine working? Okay. Again, I'll just, for the sake of being redundant, but so that people can hear who aren't in the room. The speakers who spoke today and did such a great job and presented not only with their hearts but with their heads, and I appreciate that as subject matter experts, but then also, you know, certainly your stories were telling, and my empathy could not be stronger for you. But you did know about it because you were involved in it this weekend. And so it's not that I'm not going to be supportive. I just think that, again, we are beholden to listen to the constituents and our community members. And it was a real missed opportunity, not because I wanted people to come against it, but quite the opposite. Maybe there's other good nuggets or things that we could do to make it even better. So I would just strongly encourage us as colleagues in the future to give things time and attention that they deserve. Again, in community engagement first and policy second, I think should be our standard, so that we are transparent and we are engaging people in a way that is authentic and meaningful.
Councilmember Cirillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say I've thought long and hard about how I would vote about this today. But the fact is I haven't. I have not thought long and hard about how I plan to vote today. As a gay man, as a proud gay man, I'm a bit offended that no one came to me to ask what I thought about this plan. That I would not support non-discrimination would be foolish. I absolutely support non-discrimination. But what's before us today is rushed and unprepared. This has not been made public. And I won't be supportive of it today.
Councilmember, did a representative from Equality Kansas call you last night?
I called him.
So you had a chance to talk last night and go over any of the concerns you might have today with this ordinance? Did you have a chance in that phone call to discuss this ordinance with one of the members who actually helped draft this ordinance and get any questions answered?
I'm not going to, Mayor, I'm not going to debate with you those
Just
types
wanted
of
to
things,
clarify
but
your statement. You said that you didn't have a chance to discuss this ordinance, and I just want to know if on that call with a member from Equality Kansas if you had that chance. Because if not, I understand. I just wanted to, you confirmed that you were on a call. Perhaps you didn't have a chance. I wanted you to have an opportunity, for the sake of transparency, to address that.
I had a discussion with Tom, yes. I discussed my concerns with him. I discussed exactly what I said up here publicly to him. I said that we need an enforcement mechanism, and an enforcement mechanism was brought to me last night. These two documents were brought to me last night. That's not transparency.
I'll make a motion.
And quite frankly, it was my birthday last night, and I spent some time with my family, and I got up at 1:30 this morning to start my second job. So please don't tell me I haven't had time to review this. Because you're right, I haven't had time to review this.
So I'll just point out that no one asked any questions when we went line by line over the 8 sentences with the subject matter experts. Is there anybody who would like to ask those questions now, with hopefully the opportunity of clarifying?
I think Councilman Tuttle has brought up a number of very important questions that other council members and myself are concerned about.
We do have people who
this is
are
rushed
gaining
and
the floor.
This is rushed and unprepared.
Council member, you don't have the floor.
I do have the floor. I do have the floor. This is rushed and unprepared.
Okay.
And I make a motion that we table this for
Make a substitute motion that we pass
for 1
it.
month.
I make a substitute motion that we pass it. Is there a substitute motion to pass this out? Is there a second to that? Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for getting the floor. Vice Mayor Johnson.
My only comment is we are better than what we are showing the public right now.
You're right.
We have to do better. This is serious. And I understand disagreements, but we're better than this. Let's keep having a dialogue. Let's talk this through. Although I am supportive of this, these are valid questions that need to be answered as we work this out. These are valid, and I'll use my experience as a 16-year-old who worked at Burger King who felt discrimination. If I didn't know what the process was to complain, if I didn't know what the process was to get justice, I would have what I had, which was watching someone less qualified become a manager when I couldn't be one, who was younger than me. It was because I was black. I felt that. This is important to me because I'm one of those protected classes. I know that it's hard to go through the state and federal government, but we are better than this. We need to get these questions answered, whether it's right now at the bench or whether it's finding a way to pass and push off a second reading, whatever that looks like. The public deserves it. We deserve it. We need to be those examples for the community. We can be better than this. We have been better than this, and we need to be better than this. It's my only comment right now.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
There is a substitute, well, there was an amendment. There was a motion or substitute motion to pass this bill today, this ordinance. Is there a second?
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Can somebody?
Well, we had two motions on the floor. One of them was to table this for a month, which someone yelled second but didn't have the floor. And then I made a substitute motion to that, up and down, to pass it out as is, which means if my motion fails, it goes back onto the first motion, which is a table. I want to get a vote on this. And I don't want to put this off because it's been put off for over 20 years. And we have no indication that anyone is interested in, anyone else is interested to come here and speak. We have no indication that this isn't the folks who want to be heard today, besides those who emailed, and that's because, again, we've had every major news outlet in our area say this is what was happening today. So with that, and we could get pulled off second reading, and we could pump the brakes on it then if something comes up or so on. But I don't want to make these subject matter experts, these folks, take more time off and have to come in here and do this again out of the off chance that we will have credible opposition that we would want to, I guess, adhere to this. So I'm making a substitute motion to pass it out as is. And again, if you all vote no on that, it doesn't have enough votes, then the table motion is back on. So that's the point of clarification. Councilmember Tuttle, we're talking about the motion now.
Can I ask a question about the motion? Because
Of course.
I'm still a little confused. So we have a motion and a second to table it. I didn't hear for a month, I just heard to table it. And then now we have a substitute motion to pass it today without a second, and you're looking for a second.
Right, and we're
Okay.
talking to the motion. And again, if
Can
my
I-
substitute motion doesn't, if it's seconded and it fails, it goes back onto the motion to table. Then we vote on the motion to table.
So before I do something, I need to ask one more time. May I do that?
The floor is yours.
I still have questions about this and the enforcement. And I know I'm being incredibly redundant and probably annoying, but I still don't know where those land. And my fear is if you get a second and we pass it, then we just move on and those aren't addressed. And those are important to me. The other thing that I do want to mention too, and I applaud Vice Mayor and Councilmember Cirillo for making very heartfelt comments, but you also reminded me, Vice Mayor, that we do need a really robust rollout plan, because as a 16-year-old young man, how would you have known about this? How are the 16-year-old young men or women or veterans or anyone who's under this going to find out? So that's a whole nother can of worms. I would be willing to move forward today if I can just know how my issues are going to be addressed. Does that make sense? I don't know.
So
I guess I'm looking for suggestions, guidance. I mean, to me, I don't. Can I, legal, Jennifer, is there thoughts?
What are the opportunities to further discuss if we move forward and find out more information or different action?
I'm sorry, was your question, are there opportunities to get further information?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember, that there are, if we move forward today with this, what are the opportunities for us to still gather more information and make changes if needed?
I don't want to, I guess.
Well, the ordinance would be without that information. It would be passed with the questions not yet answered. It doesn't contain a statute of limitations, and it doesn't contain some definitions. So those things are not included, and it would not be effective until a second reading.
So what I hear you saying is, if we passed it today, it goes on first reading. So please correct me when I'm wrong, okay? I'm going to say it and then tell me if I'm saying it wrong. If we pass it today, it goes on first reading. We have the opportunity then to do research and go back and add where the fines go, what the appeals process is before second reading, or would we have to start over again?
That's correct. Second reading is generally to make minor corrections and tweaks. In our past, it's usually been just referred to for that process, but second reading is when it would become effective.
With that being said, while I am not at all pleased with the way this was handled or brought to us, because the residents did not have an opportunity to provide feedback, even though it happened this weekend, these 8 sentences change a lot for a lot of people. With that said, I am willing to make a second so that we can have continued discussion and potentially move this forward. I don't think anyone is especially concerned about the ordinance as the way it was handled, and that's not fair to our community. So, second.
There's been a second. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to the motion? There's no one to speak to the substitute motion. By voting yes on this motion, the ordinance gets pushed out and then we can make adjustments on second reading if there's further concerns that people come in. If this motion fails, it goes on to the original motion to table. So with that, there's no discussion on the motion, and I think the folks on the board, I don't know if they want to speak to the motion. If not, we will.
I pushed my button.
Well, you did, but so before the motion was seconded, I had a list. We are speaking only to the motion, not to the ordinance, because there's been a motion and a seconded. So if you would like to speak to the motion, you can do that.
I would like to, but now I don't have that opportunity. You're allowing me to now?
And I don't know if my mic's working, so I apologize. So just, Jennifer, can you help me out with this? What I'm trying to do here, we have a motion and a second, so the motion, discussion of the motion, should be of the motion. I believe I had people on the board before then, so I'm trying to ask if people are willing to speak to the motion or if we're just continuing to discuss this. I apologize. Let's just go ahead and just let the people on the board speak, even if it's not to the motion. I might begin a little too undue procedure here. So if we could ask the clerk to, or Councilmember Claycomb, you have the floor.
Well, first of all, I'd like to know what we're voting on, but we did get a list of definitions of protected classes, and I appreciate that. We got that this morning. Again, did not have that last Friday, as we should have. But I think there's another question that that everybody may not, because there were questions about this earlier, about what employment means, what housing means, and what public accommodations means. So could we just get clarity on that before, because you're asking us to vote on this, right? That's what the motion is, to vote on acceptance of this. And there have been questions about that, because I think that this means that every business here in Wichita would be affected by this. Every landlord would be affected by this. And then I guess I would like a definition of public accommodations. I've looked that up. I think I know what it means, but I would like legal to weigh in on that to make sure that my definition is correct.
Responding to your question, I mean, that definition could be adopted from federal or state. I don't have a definition before me to provide to you at this time. I mean, we can find one that we agree on. The same goes for employer. I mean, for instance, the state law and federal law define employer differently, depending on the number of employees. So those are some definitions that could be, it should be included after further research.
And Jennifer, we could add those on second reading because that falls under the same category that was mentioned. Is that correct?
Yes.
Councilmember Claycomb?
Thank you. So second reading happens next week.
Traditionally it would, but it would be up to the council to determine when the second reading would come back. If you decided not to bring it back, it wouldn't be next week.
Or
yes,
2 weeks.
Yes, it would, because we have consent. Yeah. So it would normally be that unless you determine a date certain in the future when you want the second reading to come back.
And generally, as you just mentioned, Manager, second readings are on consent agenda.
Right.
So we would have to pull it off of consent. And next week is not a regular meeting.
Right. I think, and I'll let Jennifer correct me, I think you could direct in the motion that it come back for second reading on, what's it called? Not new business,
unfinished,
but...
Unfinished business.
Yeah.
Unfinished business.
Yeah, unfinished business.
Councilmember Tuttle.
I just wanted to add, and thank you for being such a good thinker, Councilmember Claycomb, because that hadn't gone through my head that it would be on consent. I would not want it to be on consent, and I'd be happy, would not want it to go on consent, and I'd be happy to be the one to pull it off consent, but I also would not want it to be next week because we have workshop, and I think we need still more time. So maybe July 6th, I think, is the next meeting. Is that correct? So.
And I think and I would be happy to support that. We would have to determine a second reading if we get it past the first reading, I believe, but I think we're all in consensus that we would want to ensure that all other input is utilized. So there's a motion and a seconded motion. The clarification, I think, is very important, but I hope that we can keep the discussion around, moving forward with this motion, or if motion doesn't pass. Councilmember Bluebog.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm surprised you're discouraging us from wanting to discuss this and rush it to a vote. I really don't think that's in the best interest. I feel like everything done here procedurally has been wrong. I feel like this needs to go out to our district advisory boards. I feel like it needs more public input. I think we need some feedback from legal as to overlap with the Kansas fair housing laws, with our Kansas landlord tenant, and I will not be supportive of rushing something today.
Of course. Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to offer a friendly amendment, given the discussion, that we have the second reading come back to council on unfinished business on July 13th because of July 4th holiday. We can't do that.
If it makes a difference, I won't be here on the 13th.
Well, we got to have you here.
We got it.
All right, well, July 6th.
So.
I just wanted to take into consideration the July 4th holiday, but that is a couple of weeks to get some of these questions answered when it comes back to council. So if you would accept that friendly amendment,
of course.
Happy to support.
Again, Councilmember Clayco.
So I could not hear everything that Vice Mayor Johnson said. Did you offer a friendly amendment to move it to July 13th?
I did, but Bob won't be here, so I just went back to July 6th, and for it to come back on unfinished business and not the consent agenda.
Which would be for the second reading.
Yeah, for the second reading.
If this was to pass today.
Well, I will say that this does still trouble me, that we are not taking this out to the public, as Councilmember Blueboss said. But this does give them some time to come back. I am concerned that legal counsel said that generally on second reading, we only do small amendments to or changes to an ordinance. Is there anything, Jennifer, that keeps us from, I mean, what is there a definition of what and what cannot be done on a second reading?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. Members will cast their vote.
Mayor, if I may, to clarify your motion, it really needs to be made again to say place this ordinance on first reading and then direct when your second reading is going to be.
Of course. So this motion is a substitute motion to pass the ordinance with the enforcement that we've been discussing. And that second reading be taken up on July 6th. In which it will be placed under unfinished business on our agenda. And there's no objection from the second. That should work. Clerk, open the roll.
Mayor,
Nope,
do we
you
have
have
someone?
someone.
We have someone on there. Councilmember Fry.
Thank you. I just want to be clear, because we got two copies of the ordinance, one which was described as the Honda plan, and one that was described as the Cadillac plan. I believe the Cadillac plan was the one that had the creation of the Human Rights Commission and the enforcement. So is that the one that, or is it the basic one?
It is the Honda. The
Honda.
one with the 8 lines that made the difference between this one and the one that we had on Wednesday.
I'm sorry, because I understood the basic one didn't have those 8 lines. Oh yeah, there it is. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Councilmember Tuttle.
I'll withdraw.
Clerk will open the roll. Members cast the vote. With the result of 4 yeas to 3 nays, that motion does pass. The bill does pass and will be on second reading.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Council member appointments and comments.
Are any council member appointments at this time? Are there any announcements for the good of the group at this time? There are no. Councilmember Tuttle.
We established a policy that we would be transparent in our community and that we would allow everyone to have the opportunity to review the information that we are going to discuss on Tuesday, that we can do research, we can talk to our constituents, we can talk to staff, we can think about unintended consequences. If we passed a policy today, an ordinance that's important, that policy is just as important. We didn't pass it just for grandeur or whatever. And so I'm going to strongly recommend that this council not bring things forward that do not pass that do not follow our policy. We had guests here today that took time off work. We had people that were vested in this, and for that I'm grateful. And that probably was part of the decision to move forward. Maybe for some, I can't speak. But I hope this never happens again, because it's not fair to the staff, it's not fair to the fellow council members, and it's certainly not fair to our community.
Councilmember Frye.
Thank you. I would just like to remind the public that this week is the Wichita Open at Crestview Country Club in District 2. It is a very positive event. Last year they did not able to do it the way they traditionally do, but the crowds are back. Very excited about it. It's a benefit for KU Wichita Pediatrics, so get out and enjoy. The weather's going to be fantastic. It's a great highlight for our community. And then secondly, I'd like to wish former Mayor Jeff Longwell a happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Jeff Longwell. Vice Mayor Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just want to remind the community that this week is a great week for Juneteenth. Lots of celebrations. Some of our local restaurants are partaking in a Juneteenth drink that benefits a scholarship for Mr. and Mrs. Juneteenth. We just had the first annual event at Wichita State, and it was great. And this Saturday over at McAdams, we'll have the Juneteenth parade, a day full of events and fun and food for the community, and want to bring everyone out. So just wanted to remind the community of that as well.
There's no further announcements for the good of the group. Then I will move that the city council recess into executive session for, is this a 40 or a 9? 40 minutes. Good. 40 minutes to consider finalists for the vacant municipal court judge position pursuant to KSA 754319B2 to discuss personnel matters of non-elected professionals. The executive session is required to, 1, protect the privacy interests of an identifiable individual. The executive session will begin at, give us a 12-minute break, at 12:30, and again last for 40 minutes.
Second.
Motion's been made and then seconded. Clerk, open the roll. Members cast the vote. The result of 7 yeas to 0 nays, that motion does pass. We're in executive session. We will reconvene in this room afterwards to either extend the executive session or to end the meeting. Thank you.